Support for Podcast by Night comes from Midnight Syndicate. To find out more about their gothic horror instrumental music, please visit midnightsyndicate.com. Welcome back to Podcast by Night. I am John Long.
I'm Jennifer Wolf.
And here we are once again exploring the wonderful world of darkness, in particular the Vampire the Masquerade role-playing game. We're in a different space right now doing this recording, so we apologize if there are any strange sounds going on.
John has weird neighbors.
I do. They like to garden on the day of rest. Go figure.
Well, that and you live near the airport.
Well, hey, you know what? I'm okay with that because it's Burbank instead of LAX.
That's very true.
Very true. On this episode, this should be episode number 4, we have a special guest with us. This is the beginning of our segment we call ST Corner, or Storyteller's Corner.
Woohoo!
And introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Michael Steinbach. I'm a storyteller for the Pillars of Salt, Vampire the Masquerade LARP here in Los Angeles. I'm happy to be here, guys.
Oh, we're great to have you. Happy to have you. Today we're going to be talking about, as you guys know, we are going along the lines of you're a newbie. You just walked into the venue, and what do?
Someone hands me a character sheet, and oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god.
Yes, dreaded character sheet. It's not as scary as it might seem, but it can be daunting. So Michael's here.
What are all these numbers about?
Exactly. He's going to help us navigate this.
What's this clan mean?
Why do I have these dots? What are these dots for?
Oh my gosh. Am I supposed to be like really old or something?
So we're going to help navigate you through that and kind of give you a signpost, guidepost, compass from which you will totally look at this character sheet and not be afraid.
Well, a little less afraid.
Be afraid. Be very, very afraid.
That's true. You could be nom-noms for some other character. You never know. Okay, so Jen, why don't you start us off? What is a character sheet?
Well, for those of you who have never ever played any video games or role-playing games ever before in your life, a character sheet is really just a set of numbers and dots that kind of represent all the cool things that your character can do. For those of you who have video game experience, this isn't terribly unlike the stats you have as a video game character. And it's basically the same idea. It is a numeric valuation of all the spiffy things about your character, and sometimes not so spiffy things.
Right. I like to, when I'm talking with new players, really go in and talk to them and say that the character sheet are the mechanics of what's happening. All of the role play that will come from your character, how you personally say hello, your personal backstory, all that jazz, that's the story, that's the role play, that's the RP. The character sheet is all of the mechanics. It's the specific numbers that when you actually say, oh, I want to, use dominate to control your mind and do the whole look into my eyes, I will tell you what to do.
I want to use that accent.
Character sheet. The character sheet gives you the mechanical ability to do that, but all the role play comes from how you feel and how your character wants to move.
Oh, so it's like a framework from which to build the character off of.
Exactly. It gives you that ability to go, oh, I am really good at X, or I'm really good at Y, or I'm really bad at this other thing. And how do I want to play to my strengths, and how do I want to try to hide my weaknesses from my enemies so that they don't come and attack me?
Oh, excellent. Great advice. Okay. So let's see here. In the Vampire the Masquerade, there are 2 forms of game available to players. You got tabletop and LARP. Tabletop is the standard, almost board game-like. You sit around a table with friends. You've got your dice, your Cheetos, and you sort of just roll it out. Cactus cooler. Word to the cactus cooler.
I mean, I don't know about you. My friends are super healthy. We have like bowls of kale around.
What?
That's because it's LA,
God, LA gamers.
I love kale, so don't knock it.
No.
I'm a good Midwestern girl, and I like my
the kale chips with the LaCroix water. We get it. And then what we currently are focusing on, the LARP version.
So what is LARP again, John?
Live action role-playing.
Yep. So for those of you who hear LARP and you're like, what is that? Or you get visions of people running around with foam weapons.
That's a version.
That is a version of LARP. In Vampire, the LARP system is different, mostly because we're not playing in a fantasy system. So there's far fewer knights and foam weapons. But it's also by far, I think, the more popular of the two systems that they use for playing Vampire. You still can play it on tabletop. That's great. We all appreciate it. We like playing tabletop. But LARP is probably going to be the most common form of the game you'll run across if you're interested in playing Vampire.
In this game, the framework, as we talk about, and the system as they have in place really lends itself to helping the improvisational theater aspect of the game come through.
Absolutely. In a tabletop, you're almost a little more locked in. You have dice rolls that are going to happen, usually D10s for a vampire system, which are 10-sided dice as opposed to the standard 6-sided dice that you'd see in like craps and things like that. But in a LARP, when you're actually getting there and you're standing there and your character is talking to another character, so much more variability can come in as how you're actually talking to that person. So instead of, if you are, in fact, like I said earlier, going to use a dominate power and look into my eyes, instead of rolling a bunch of dice and like interrupting the flow of the conversation to, all right, let me pull out everything in my pocket, da-da-da, you have a much different testing system in a LARP that allows the flow to happen a little faster, a little easier than the interruption of rolling dice.
Right, and that system is, oddly enough, Rochambeau.
Yep, rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors. It's quick, it's easy, and it does the job.
Yes, there is no Spock. There is no, what's the other ones in there?
Lizard.
Spock.
Yeah.
Yep.
There is no lizard. There is no Spock. There is just rock, paper, scissors.
That's right. Yeah, simple. Keep it simple.
Let's see, we had Cage when I was growing up as well, and Grenade, I think, was one of them, which was a bomb.
It was the
yeah.
bomb.
Yeah.
We don't have the bomb anymore, but... So here's the thing with the Rochambeau testing. When you have dice tests, it's pretty easy. You roll some dice, the storyteller rolls some dice, you compare numbers, and whoever comes up with the best numbers is the winner in that particular test.
Yeah, you have to deal with the number of successes and the number of successes that I have versus the number of failures that I have versus the number of successes you have and the number of failures you
Very
have.
statistical.
Right.
But when you're playing Rochambeau, then you have to decide a different way of winning. Obviously, with the rock, paper, scissors, it is, rock beats scissors, paper beats rock. But what happens when you tie? I throw a rock and you throw a rock.
That's actually really simple. You just, there's a balance of, again, in the mechanics, in that framework, in that character sheet, there are test pools. And they're generally, so when you tie, when you and I we both throw a rock, then you start getting into that framework again, that little bit of mechanic from your character sheet. You would compare test pools, which sounds like it's a complicated thing, but it's really pretty easy. For example, if I'm going to throw a punch at you, I'm going to use my physical pool, and I'm going to use my brawl pool, which is my ability to throw a punch, and I'm going to add those two numbers together, and let's say I come up with 10. And since you're probably not going to want to be punched, you're going to use your physical pool and your dodge pool to try to dodge out of the way of my fist. So you take your physical plus dodge, and I take my physical plus brawl, and we compare those numbers. So if I were to throw paper and you to throw rock, and I'm trying to punch you, I win. If we both throw scissors, and my brawl plus physical is 10, and your physical plus dodge is 9, I'm successful and I punch you. But if your dodge is 11 and my brawl is only 10, you dodge out of that way. So it becomes a little bit more about the mechanics at that point. But it's usually you're adding like a number between 1 and 10 to another number between 1 and 5. It's really simple math.
I like simple math because guess what? I'm an idiot at math. Many people are idiots at math. So the less math I have to do in a game, the happier I am as a player.
All right. Well, before we just start describing what those attributes are, why don't we start at the top of the sheet?
The
Yeah,
basics.
sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit there.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Believe me, you couldn't have said it better. I couldn't have said it better myself.
You can't
so
be
there
on
you
this
go.
podcast anymore, Michael. Oh my God.
Oh,
No,
fine, bye.
we need him. No, I'm kidding. All right, so you just walk into the game, you're handed this character sheet. Let's start from the top. What's first?
Well, the first things you're going to see on most standard character sheets is you have a character name and you have a clan. Oh my gosh. So everyone in the game is going to have a clan, and we've already discussed clans a little bit. Clans are the bloodlines of vampires, shall we say, the vampires that all share common characteristics and common powers and common goals, more or less. And you will belong to one of these clans. And in future episodes, we're actually going to be going through each of the clans one by one, so you'll be able to learn a little bit more about each one. But that's important to know because your clan is going to be your most basic unit of who in the world do I know and how do I relate to this world.
Right. It's the first thing that comes to mind when you look at this and say, like you said, how do I relate to this world? Where do I fit in? What's my place? It's a starting point for you to walk in on.
Exactly. And also, generally, most of the clans are fairly friendly and connect well with each other. So if you walk in and you're a Toreador, you can look around and you can see other Toreadors and go, oh, I'm going to go hang out with those people. It gives you that extra bit of almost that initial put your foot in the door benefit of these people have at least some of the same drives that I do.
Right.
So right after that, usually on a typical sheet, you're going to see this word archetype.
What is an archetype?
If you're a psychology major, you already know all about archetypes, but most of us only got past basic psych.
Yeah, we all don't know who Jung is, so.
You know who Jung is, obviously.
Obviously, but for those who don't, Michael, what's archetype?
The archetype is a basic idea or drive or that initial instinct perhaps on the character. If the character archetype was perhaps a judge, I've seen that a couple times on some character sheets. They have a drive to really kind of set right and wrong, and if this is a person has failed or done the wrong thing, you judge them harshly. Or perhaps you judge them favorably, depending on how the rest of your character feels about it. Other archetypes just give you an idea, a position, and it really helps, honestly, for role play. There are some mechanical things that you can do with your archetype and massage, but it really helps for that initial character creation when you are looking at, oh, I'm a Toreador who is a bon vivant. I'm winsome out there, and I really want to live that artist bohemian style. If you are, however, a Toreador that is a type A personality, as a character I once played had, they might be a little more like, we have to get the project done, we have to get to the end of the art, and it just still all about art, which is a bloodline trait, but it's still it involves that individual and how they react to the world and their perspective.
It is basically an easy way just to define a personality. And every vampire is going to have a common archetype, but how they define that archetype may be different. So a type A personality for you, the Toreador, may be different than the type A personality for the Venture over there, or the Bruja, or the Tremere. You all have that archetype, but it comes out in different ways. It doesn't have to be one standard way.
So that's fantastic. So as a player, you already have three things that inform your character and how you're going to play that. You've got the name, which, some people have difficult time coming up with. You have your clan, which is like your microculture, and your archetype for how you act, how people perceive your actions.
You also, on your sheet, will see this little number known as generation. Now, this is a tricky number for many people because they're like, what in the world does generation mean? Like, what?
And some of the math can be backwards and forwards, too, which makes it also a little weird because people will talk about how many dots you have in generation, but then there's the level of generation. This is truly one of the more unusual elements of all this, and if you understand this, you'll be able to understand the rest of the sheet really easily.
Yeah, basically, to put it in a nutshell, we've discussed previously this whole idea of progenitors and people and how people rank in terms of their potency of their blood. This is basically an easy way to rank how potent of a vampire you are. The lower the number is, the more potent you are. And the higher the number is, the less potent you are. And it affects a lot of things on the sheet, like how much of anything you can learn, how much time you've had to put into things like creating influences in the world around you. There's a lot of things that are affected by it.
Right. And next down we have title, which is something that...
Well, more we have...
Actually, can I go just one other thing in generation that I'd like to talk about? The thing that truly makes it tricky is the lower your overall generation, generally the more potent you are. However, you get lower generation... you get a lower generation point by buying more dots in generation. So it makes it just a little bit tricky to understand. If you have 1 dot in generation, you are a neonate in the game. You are an 11th generation vampire. However, if you have 5 dots in generation, you are a 6th generation vampire. So it's sort of, for every dot that you have, you step up a point or two from that original starting number. So you can have 5 dots in generation, be a 6th generation vampire, and be extremely potent. However, if you have 1 dot in generation, you're an 11th generation vampire. So it's kind of that backwards math.
Yeah, it's not very clean on the sheets. The mechanic itself is very confusing. And as a new player, if you're walking in the door going, wait, what? I mean, one of the things we all emphasize, especially with Pillars Assault, which is the game that Michael is a storyteller for and we're all affiliated with, is if you're a new person and you walk in the door and you're like, I have no idea what's going on right now, don't be afraid to ask.
Absolutely. That's why the storytellers are there, is when the player has a question, we're there to help jump in, to be as unbiased as possible, to say, oh, yes, you have a question about X, here's the answer Y, and letting then the player go on and continue their character journey.
Fantastic. All right, the next 2 items that are on the character sheet kind of go hand in hand. We have group or sect. And title. Now, sect is something, and titles actually, are something we're going to get into in the next episode of Podcast by Night. That just is your affiliation of in Vampire Society. There are different groups that have different ideologies, and this one just denotes which one you belong to.
It's the clique you hang out with. It's all the cool kids.
Or not.
It's the political entity that you exist in.
Thank you, Michael.
Sorry, I had to bring politics into this.
No, beautiful.
I like Mean Girls. I think that's a much more accurate portrayal right there.
All right,
Are you sure that's it? I mean, Camarilla is politics. Sabah could be Mean Girls.
Oh, Camarilla is totally Mean Girls.
Totally mean. Well, there you go.
I was a high school teenager,
Yeah, we're all plastics and Heathers. It's okay. And then title is your rank in that sect or group?
Yes.
To a degree. You generally, in a particular city, there is the prince, and that is the highest title in that city. The prince is the one who has a lot of the final say, can create their own curiosities, their own specific rules for that city.
We'll be getting into the prince in the next episode. No, 2 episodes. In the next couple of episodes.
Don't worry, we'll get there.
But then each clan can have some of its own ranks. The different ranks have different titles. Some clans don't really care about your other clan rank. It can be a whole political game in of itself, just figuring out what other people's ranks are.
Yes, welcome to the Mad Nights. Okay, so moving on, we've got...
what? I was just going to do a transition. We've now gotten through all the most basic stuff. You've walked in the door. You have had a glance at your character sheet. You know your name. You know your clan. You know your generation. You know all this basic information. You can go up and introduce yourself. But now you're looking down your sheet and you come up to this thing called attributes.
Now, attributes, this is going to feed into what Michael was talking about with the testing and those pesky dots. So let's go down the attribute list there.
Well, first of all, attributes, they represent pretty much 3 major areas that most everybody has. You either have socials, physicals, or mentals.
Other gaming systems like D&D is very popular, very well known. They have 6 basic stats. World of Darkness wanted to pull this in, make it a little easier, and they only base it off of physical, socials, and mentals.
And pretty much each of those is exactly what the
You'd think it
label
would
says
be.
on. Yeah, it's what the label says on the tin. Physicals is all about the physical things you do, like running or punching or dodging or.
Right, and social is, all the shallow things, like how pretty am I? How charming am I?
Hey, I resemble those remarks.
That's okay. I understand. You're very handsome.
And the mental has to do with how smart you are, how much of a book learner, perhaps how mentally manipulative, how into planning you are.
Most of my characters have high mentals. I'm just throwing that out there.
Says the PhD student.
Hey, never underestimate wits and cunning. I'm just saying. And then along with those physical, mentals, and socials attributes, we have focuses. Now, what are focuses?
Focuses are the extra piece that your character truly has delved into. For example, a toreador who was a performer themselves would probably have very high socials, and their specific focus would be perhaps on appearance or charisma, because they themselves have trained into such a performer in such a way. Whereas a physical person might be a little more dexterous. They're perhaps they were a dancer in the background, or they could be the strong man, so strength will be their focus. And these play into, and we'll talk about this a little further down, they play into the disciplines, the powers that each vampire has as well, so they can give a person perhaps a little bit of an edge in a test against someone else.
So in terms of your attributes, you are assigned numbers to each of these. And in the World of Darkness system and in Vampire, the base for each of the attributes is going to be 753. So 7 is going to be the area where you have the highest attributes, while 3 is going to be the area you have the lowest attributes. So say you're that dancer. You may have a high social and a high physical, or high physical and high social, depending on what kind of dancing you're doing. Your mental may be the low one.
Dance fighting.
Dance fighting? I so totally want to do that.
Yeah.
I have been watching the Marvel movies. It's all about Natasha Romanoff.
That's right.
Oh, see, I was going dance fighting like they used to do, as described in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel of ancient Chinese history at the fall of the Han Empire, where women would do sword dancing. And okay, yeah, that's me nerding out.
It's
Wow.
Chinese history.
That's awesome, though. No, I was totally thinking about 80s movies. But anyway, moving on.
So yeah, when you get your sheet, normally you will have one area that will be your highest and your area that you are perhaps the best in.
Now, just to give a visual, when you say 753 and attribute rating, what does that look like? What is that on the sheet?
So on the character sheet, if you're looking especially at the basic character sheet at the back of the book, after each of these attributes, there are a long string of dots. As you're building your character, you're going to fill in these dots with various skills. And that's where you're going to have 3 dots in your low, you're going to have 5 dots in your medium, and 7 dots in your high. So it's also really easy visually to just be able to see, oh, I have 7 mental and 3 physical. So I know that this character is going to be a really smart character.
Excellent.
And each of these attributes can be, as you go along, added to. The game has what's called XP, and XP can be used to buy more things on your sheet, attributes included. But there is a cap to your attributes. You can't buy all the attributes in the world.
Oh, but I wanted to be 45 mental and be super smart.
No Munchkin. No Munchkin. Bad Munchkin.
You cannot have a big brain. I'm sorry. But you can cap out all of your attributes. Your attribute caps all depend on your generation. Some characters are going to only be able to get 10 in anything, while other characters may be able to go a little higher depending on how old and powerful they are.
I was fortunate one time I got to play a character, super high mentals. He was 5 dots in generation. He had a 15 mental as his starting.
I played a character.
It was fantastic.
I played a character. It was pretty close. Not quite that close, but pretty close. When your character's doing any special actions, whether they're punching something, or they're trying to charm someone, or they're trying to cast a spell, you're going to rely on these attributes. These create the pool that Michael was talking about in order to do anything special with your character. So if you are wanting to punch another character, you would use the physicals as your base pool, plus whatever other extra things you're adding into that pool to be able to do the action.
Yeah, that's where the Rochambeau comes in, we spoke of.
Yeah. So you would use that as your base pool. Often you test against the storyteller or another character, and then you see who wins.
Yeah, and speaking of those additions to the basic attributes, that'll bring us down to abilities.
Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Now, as the name implies, these are the skills or talents that your character possesses, such as Michael said, brawl. There's also computer, drive, security, anything that you could possibly think of that your character would need to be skilled at or has a raw talent for is in this category.
Exactly. So if you were, say, a dancer, like Michael suggested, you would probably have a performance ability. You would be able to dance.
Right. And if you were a painter, you might have a craft ability. If you were the getaway driver, your drive skill is going to be pretty high. There's also things like subterfuge and streetwise, which actually can give you some fun little benefits in-game as you read those particular sections. But knowing, again, how good you are at a thing, it's generally on either 0 dots to 5 dots. Some characters, if you, with shenanigans, you can go 6 or 7 or even 8 dots. But generally, you're just going to be at a number between 0 and 5. The higher the number, the better you are at the thing.
And I should stress this. If there is something you want to do, you really need to have an ability to do it. Don't just assume your character can just drive a car, because if you don't have that dot and drive, you may not be able to operate a car that well. If you hear other characters in games speaking another language, you're not just going to know what they're saying unless you actually have the linguistic ability to understand it too. If there's ancient myths that need to be known about or knowledge about werewolves, all of that requires a special ability to be able to do that thing.
Now, as we saw in attributes, the level of dots or ranking, I guess, in that particular skill, physical, what have you, it translates here too. What is that? What do those levels mean with the abilities?
So again, you're going to go from 0 to 5. 0 means you really have no skill. If you think about, let's say there was a 500-year-old vampire and you handed them an iPhone and they had never seen it before, they would have no idea what the heck this thing that lights up when they shake it is. But if you are perhaps maybe let's say you just became a vampire 5 years ago, and you were already a really tech-savvy person when you were mortal, you might have a really high computer skill, which would allow you to, fully use the phone. Maybe even if your computer skill was 4 or 5, you could start getting into computer hacking. And in addition to those skills, sometimes they actually play with your disciplines. And again, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, I'm sorry. The disciplines, the powers that you might have, because there is a stealth skill. And if you are a vampire that has the obfuscate power, where you can actually start cloaking yourself in shadow, that stealth skill helps your ability to hide.
So you're saying that the level in the ability, the amount of dots you have, is not necessarily like, say that you have 1 or 2 languages. You could be a master at that one language.
You normally with languages you'll have more than one. For every dot that you have an additional language. Like you have 1 dot, perhaps basic English and French. By the time you get to 5 dots, you might know French and Spanish and Portuguese and Latin and Ukrainian. There are extra things that can actually get you even more languages than that if you go down that rabbit hole and really want to be a true linguist.
Okay, then let's go on the computer knowledge then. At level 1, you just know how to use one.
Right. They're like, oh, look, email. I can occasionally send pictures.
Okay, so like level 2 would
Cat
be...
videos. Cat videos.
Level 2 is much more, I'm on Facebook a lot. Maybe I've got a social media presence, which is dangerous to have as a vampire. But you have the ability to go beyond just, point and click. Now you're using mail merge on Word. You're using Excel to actually calculate out long formulas because you actually know that, you can do formulas in cells. Computers 3 would be a little more like, okay, you are the IT support. You really know what's going on. You can find ways to fix things. Once you start getting into 4 and 5, you can get into actually like computer hacking, trying to break into a bank to get bank records, trying to hack the NSA or the FBI. Don't recommend doing those things again as a vampire, but you have now that ability, that greater than average, greater than even exceptional ability to do the thing.
Oh, great. So that's just then, and that's kind of across the board with each ability. The level of the dots equals your aptitude.
Right. And some abilities are like languages. For every dot, you gain an extra language. Academics, that's, for every dot, you have an extra degree. But it generally also goes to, if you're a character that has 5 dots in academics and you know a bunch of stuff about chemistry and biochem and other related fields to that, anytime anyone has a question, you can go, oh, I probably know something about that, and then your character can actually work with some of that extra information.
Great. Now, Jen, just like with the attributes, you said that we had like a 753 starting. Is there something like that with the abilities?
So with abilities, as a character is created, you actually have a certain amount of numbers of dots you can give away. It's a little confusing, but when you're doing a character build, you usually start with 1 ability that's at level 4, 2 abilities at level 3, 3 abilities at level 2, and 4 abilities at level 1.
Which is a nice, easy progression. There's 1 at level 4, there's 2 at 3, there's 3 at 2, there's 4 at 1,
and usually you're going to make 4 the one ability that your character is absolutely going to need. So let's say you're playing a character who is more on the magic-y side. You'll want to have a 4 in occult, but another character is playing
that dancer.
That dancer, you may want performance 4.
Exactly.
The thing with abilities is that there's some common abilities that pretty much everybody's going to have, or at least everybody can have access to. So things like drive, or computers, or stealth, or security, or subterfuge, or leadership. These are going to be common ones that people are going to be able to have access to just from their backgrounds. And these we call our primary abilities. They're pretty universal across the board. But then there's this concept called secondary abilities. So what is that, Michael?
Secondary abilities are where your character has really, truly wanted to specialize in something. For example, if you are a Ventru and you have lots of money flying around, you might want to take the secondary ability of finance or economics that allow you to do extra things with money and make it harder for other characters and other entities that exist in the world that the storytellers are running, makes it harder for them to act against you. Other things such as, we were talking a moment for the computer skill, as it goes up higher and higher, there is also a secondary ability of computer hacking, if you truly want to focus in on that. And then when you're actually, when you start building up that, you get even more clever, even more focused, and then if you have high computer and high computer hacking, then maybe you try to hack into the FBI or the NSA.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that because there's these other groups that like looking for vampires, and they usually can find you.
Yeah, the technocracy, that's a fun group, but that's a slightly different angle than the vampire.
Exactly.
Wait, no, there's no Fox Mulder in this?
There could be
could
a Fox Mulder.
Oh, goody.
In my headcanon, there is a Fox Mulder.
Well, that is actually one of the hunter groups, is a government-sanctioned, but again, we're talking greater world of darkness there if you really want to get nerd out.
Yeah, we'll do that in a future episode. But, so secondary abilities are very much those abilities that come from people having specific interests, or they've perhaps specifically studied or mastered a particular area. And so there are a lot fewer of those.
Right. And in Pillars, we do like to encourage people to go out and explore some of those. And generally, we as a storyteller will run some form of role play for the person to learn that ability. Maybe they spend some time trying to find a teacher inside their own clan. If they're in Ventru and they want to learn about finance, I'm sure they could find some other Ventru out there, but then maybe that Ventru wants a favor, a boon, or hey, go and do this thing right now, and then I'll teach you finance. It allows us, the storyteller, to help involve the story into that player and give them a little more of a unique experience while they learn these unique secondary abilities.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I love Vampire LARP, is that it just sort of has that, as we said before, like a sandbox quality, that it's not just cut and dry. You're not running a module. You are part of the story.
Absolutely.
So the thing with abilities is, like you were saying with some of them, like linguistics, some of these abilities do have specializations. It's sort of like me, who has a zillion degrees, and each degree has a specialization. It's the same thing with abilities. So for academics, you can specialize in my personal favorite area, 2nd century North African Christianity, or
That's
but
not specific at all.
not specific at all.
Everybody knows that.
I mean,
Huh?
everyone, don't you guys? Or you could have a Lore's ability that specializes in werewolves or Clan Ventru or
Or Secrets of Clan
or
Venture.
Secrets of Clan Ventru or Egyptian mythology, Secrets of the Followers of Set. So yeah, each of these, some of these attributes will definitely give you some pretty cool things out of them if you want them to.
Absolutely. For example, I mentioned finance a moment ago. One of the great things that learning the secondary ability finance gives you is it gives you an automatic defense on your money if someone else is trying to attack your money, either another player or perhaps an enemy political group that the storytellers are running. Just because you know the finance and know the money so well, you have an automatic defense that you're able to maneuver and manipulate your money to make it harder for other people to attack you.
Damn, that's useful.
Absolutely.
So moving on, outside of your abilities, one of the most useful areas to have knowledge of, and probably one of the more confusing ones for new players, is this concept called backgrounds.
Backgrounds.
So what are backgrounds, Michael?
Backgrounds are the pieces of your character that they have earned so far in their vampiric life. Again, a super old 500-year vampire, they might well have had vassals and servants and knights that protected them, so they would have had bodyguards and retainers. But a newer vampire might maybe have, if they came from a rich family, they might have more resources they could call on. If they're a super social person, they might have already invested in influences, their ability to get mortals to be manipulated in ways that they want. For example, I at one point played a Toreador who had 5 points of of background in elite influences. So he was the guy that knew all of the millionaires. He knew all of the fancy art dealers. He knew people in City Hall. He knew people in movie studios. He was always able to, whenever it came up, say, I can get you that favor from that millionaire over there.
Yeah, and there are a variety of different backgrounds. You'll see generation in here because that's where generation belongs. It is technically a background. But you'll see other things in there. There's alternate identity and fame. These are backgrounds that that a character can employ to manipulate aspects of their identity. Either they can hide it or they can draw attention to it.
They can use context to get other information that they themselves might not have been able to access.
Right. They also have the backgrounds, more social backgrounds, if you will, the allies, contacts, mentor, or retainer.
Right.
Yes. And those are all going to be people who will help you out. Contacts and allies can be like people you talk to or people who you're friends with who aren't necessarily vampires or even people that are part of your vampire group. They're just people you know.
Right. And at least in Pillars of Salt, we allow that if you really want to invest in an ally or really want to seek out an unusual contact, as you buy more and more points into that background, you might actually get an ally who is perhaps a kinfolk to a werewolf. They would have access to a whole bevy of information that you as a vampire would never be able to touch because no one would ever want to talk to you. But because you've spent time, you've spent resources, you've spent XP to build up this ability to really have this one guy that trusts you, it unlocks doors into wildly different information and powers and abilities that you may never have known of before.
Exactly. And then there are backgrounds that just help you in your day-to-day night-to-night living. There's herd, haven, and resources. Herd is, we've discussed it previously. That's the group of people you maintain for food.
They're your nom-noms.
They're your nom-noms. They're a cookie jar. Haven.
I like that. Cookie jar.
It's your cookie jar. I like it. Haven is much more where you sleep during the day. This is home. This can be anywhere from a dark, dank, smelly place in a sewer to a mansion in Beverly Hills. And so it really doesn't matter so much. It's really much more what your character wants to live in. And the higher the dots you have in it, the nicer, more secure, safer place it is.
Right, and resources is, put quite simply, money. It is
Money.
funds available to
Money,
you.
money, money.
Bitch, give me my money.
money.
Wow. Very greedy bunch here. Yeah, it's essentially the currency of the mortal world that allows you to do things more easily, unless, like Michael's, his character had all that, mega influence.
Right. I see, and a thing like that, I could call in a favor to get a thing done. If I had the resources myself, I just I buy that this month, and then I buy a helicopter next month, and then I buy this other mansion over there next month, and there's that apartment complex over there that I would just want to occasionally spend the night in. I can buy that next month.
Right. So as a player, these are more things that add flavor and just meat to your character, that allow you to they sort of express how you view the world, how you move through the world of darkness.
And sometimes money solves problems in the game.
It really does. It really, really does. Just like in the real world. Oh my gosh. Look how that works. Outside of all these other pieces, there is this very tricky background called influences. And influences, I'm going to be honest, it's just confusing. It really is. But it's also a very powerful background to have.
Right. This is truly like I was talking about a moment ago, and I keep jumping ahead on you guys. I'm so sorry. I'm so excited to talk about this stuff. The influences are where you call in that favor. They, again, have specializations like we talked about earlier with some of the abilities. For every dot in that influence, you have a particular person, point of contact, organization that you have influence over. For example, you might buy a dot and get 20th Century Fox Studios as a specialty. Then you buy a second dot in that influence, and maybe that's ABC Studios, or maybe that's Marvel Studios within the greater Disney Megacorp. There are different specialties, different focuses that would have, again, access to different things, the ability to do and get you different pieces. Someone who specialized LAPD versus specialized LACMA, which is one of the big museums out here. If you needed cops, you don't want to go to the guy that's got specialization at LACMA, because he could get you art. He could get you a nice painting to go on the wall.
I like
that
paintings.
the thieves are then attracted to and steal. Or there's the other guy who is focused on something completely different. He's like, I can get you a squad car to go by your haven every hour. Just drive by, make sure there's no specific. Wow, let me try that again with words. Suspicious characters around.
So influence, you're saying, is one of those more personal things that you just looking at it on the sheet, influence 1 elite, that doesn't mean much, but you as the player can go deeper with that one and say, like you said, Fox Studios.
It is the touchstone. It tells you a little bit how many things you can do, how often you can tap it. For example, there's a concept that I believe you guys have talked about in previous podcasts called downtimes.
I don't know if we've touched it yet, but yeah.
Okay. Influence is also one of these abilities. Everybody has a standard set of downtimes. Influences give you more downtimes to play around. It allows you to do more things in a given month, because it's not you spending your night as a vampire arranging, and planning the party and getting all the details and the guest list going out. It's you call up your friend, and he said that you have influence over, and they organize everything, allowing you to now spend more time doing other things.
And there is different kinds of influence. In the game, there's 2 specific generic groups. One is elite influence, which is much more of what you think it is. It is high society. It is heads of companies. It is maybe the head of police. It's the mayor. It's the city council.
It's everything above board.
Exactly. Underworld is different. Underworld is, everything below board. It is the prostitute that's at the corner of your street. It is the crooked cop who comes around the neighborhood. It's the gang that cases the general neighborhood.
It's the mayor. It's the city council member. Oh, wait.
Wait. Yeah.
One.
It's them too.
Well, you might be able to find it on both sides of the line.
Yes, and it is possible for you as a character to have a dot in elite influence and a dot in underworld influence, and it could both be in police.
It is one of those great abilities and great extras that can really earn you a lot of favors, because influence is truly your vampire's way of controlling and manipulating the human world around them. And at times, A vampire, especially an elder vampire, the 500-year-old vampire, might need a problem solved that they just don't understand how this modern world works. And you, as a younger vampire that has built all of these contacts up, can go, yes, sir, elder of the Camarilla, I can solve that problem for you. I would be happy to do it if you just, a small, minor favor in the future. And you can really begin to play your background ability to gain you the favors of those vampires that are more powerful, maybe more politically connected in the vampiric world, because you're more connected in the mortal world.
Backgrounds, as we said, are the ways your character can interact with the world and get information, work with people, have influence on the human world. But every character has things that are great about them and things that are not so great about them. Just like we do. We all have our own merits as human beings, and we all have our flaws.
What are you talking about? I am perfectly perfect, including perfectly humble.
Yeah, okay. You keep thinking that, sweetie.
Nice segue. All right. So yes, merits and flaws. These are a little bit more of that flavor text that typically one finds in the book to say that, like Jen said, you are either very lucky, but yet you stub your toe every third Sunday. I don't know. So
I want that flaw.
I want that flaw. What are merits and flaws, Michael?
Merits and flaws are... Well, first of all, the number of merit points that you can buy is limited, so you have to be careful with what you want to buy. You can't just buy every single extra great, wonderful merit that's out there. You have to be strategic.
You only get 7 points.
I only get 7 points, and that is for the life of the character. Merits are those extra things that you are perhaps a little extra focused on. For example, there's a great merit. We were talking about a dancer earlier. There's a great merit called Artist's Blessing, which gives you free ability dots in a performance or craft skill. So if your character wanted to be that, for 1 merit point, you can actually get 3 dots in performance. So you can really make yourself this fantastic dancer using just this extra little bit of merit. Merits also, if you are a magic vampire, or perhaps you are a Nosferatu that wants to hide in the shadows, there are other merits that allow you to you make your magic stronger, or give you extra points in the test pool for your magic ability. Others will make that Nosferatu even more difficult to see, no matter how many people you have with heightened senses on the other side trying to find him.
Right, and then the downside are the flaws.
Yes, those are the, I stubbed my toe every third Sunday.
Or, as it says, you're nearsighted.
Or, you are slow healing. A lot of these flaws are... I find them very interesting as a player. I'm just going to be honest. I love flaws as a player.
Oh, yeah, truly. In stories, flaws really make the character identifiable.
And it adds to the role-playing experience, because if you're playing a character who's nearsighted, and you're not, which I wish I wasn't in real life, suddenly you have to wear glasses, or you can't be the expert marksman because you're blind as a bat.
The flaws are a great and wonderful way to have role play. Sometimes people will take them as sort of their own more interior landscape, because maybe they don't want to let out to other players that, I have the secret weakness of I'm hard of hearing, perhaps, is one of those flaws. Maybe they just always play off I'm sorry, I just didn't hear you. The room is too noisy or something. It might lead to a player's rich internal landscape, but some of them are also like, awkward mobility. My character has something wrong with their leg, and that I as the player can then walk with a limp, or maybe walk with a cane to get myself moving around, and it can really help you delve into the life of that character.
Or there's certain flaws like addiction, where that can affect the entire storyline of a character and their plot. If they have an addiction, this can feed into why they're doing the things in game that they're doing. Right,
or like we spoke about in being a vampire in the World of Darkness, you have blunted fangs, where you don't have those nifty little, I want to suck your blood.
You have the sharp teeth.
The sharp, pointy, nasty teeth, right. And vampires, they can jump no, never mind, sorry.
I love a good Monty Python reference.
And one other thing I want to say about flaws and merits is in storytelling, and we especially see it in movies, fantasy novels, typically a lot on the heroic, but also just in the anti-heroes as well. the things that they are good at or the flaws that they have that they want to overcome are often huge drivers for those characters. They're what make the story compelling. And to be able to now experience that, being able to see this character's struggle with their addiction or their nearsightedness, it's, yeah, okay, maybe you can make a joke about it and just go off, but it truly can make a compelling arc. And if you have a flaw that no one else knows that you have, you go all the way through the arc, and then at that final decision moment, at Frodo standing in Mordor, ready to drop the Ring of Power into the lava, suddenly your flaw kicks in, and you grasp that Ring of Power instead of dropping it into the lava. It can change that whole story for you in an instant.
Absolutely, absolutely. Really makes for compelling storytelling.
So now, as we're looking through our sheet, we get to the part that most everybody likes. This is everybody's favorite part of the character sheet.
That's right. Grab your capes and cowls, everybody.
This is your disciplines. What makes you special and unique as a vampire?
Yes, those lovely little, as Michael said at the very top, the look into my eyes. Yes, these are not the vampires you're looking for.
Well, actually they are, but disciplines are called disciplines because, well, they require you to practice and work at them to be able to master and discipline yourself enough to learn how to use these powers. These are your gifts as vampires. As we've mentioned in previous podcasts, vampires have a certain sort of magic in their blood, and that some of them are able to pick up intuitively certain abilities they can use their blood with, certain powers that they're able to do because they're vampires. So some of these powers are going to be more innate to a vampire than others. And as we go through the clans, we're going to actually discuss each of those a little bit more and kind of delve into the individual disciplines a little bit more. This is going to be just a very brief overview, but some will be ones that a vampire will pick up on very quickly because of the clan that they're a part of. Others are going to be ones that they can't, and they will not be able to learn those unless they have a teacher from another clan to be able to help them. So we have a whole group of the most common disciplines, but we've kind of loosely categorized them in terms of, we have those that are much more about some of our the physical abilities of vampires. So that would include ones like celerity and fortitude and potence. Those are things that a vampire can physically do. So celerity is super speed.
Right. If you think about the vampire and you see the movie and the person looks at the vampire and they're at far end of the long room, and then they glance to the side and they glance back and the vampire's right in their face. That's the example of celerity, of that vampire covering all of that distance, running, moving that fast to get right in your face as quickly as possible.
Exactly. Fortitude is supernatural stamina.
That's one of my personal favorites. You can take that shotgun blast to the face and just kind of shrug it off.
Yep.
Exactly. And potence is supernatural strength.
Right. It's you are able to manipulate the blood within your body to augment the muscles, to take your fist and drive it straight through a solid steel wall so that you can actually break in and, maybe you're going to rob the place, or especially useful if you are punching another vampire. The same fist that will go through a steel wall is probably going to go through the vampire's head.
Right. Exactly. Some of them are going to be much more social based. Presence is one of the big ones for that one.
Absolutely. The ability for awe, entrancement, just sort of, hey, you like me, I'm a nice guy, when, just the other second ago you wanted to spit in my face.
And the great thing, and going back to what you said a moment ago about the more you discipline yourself, the more you train yourself, the stronger the ability is. Presence is a great example of that. At the first kind of level of it, you have this ability called awe, which is a sort of, I'm using the power of my blood to capture the attention of everyone in the room. But by the time I have learned and studied and I'm at the 5th level of presence, it's not only, hey, I have your attention in the room, but I am so beautiful, I am so stunning, I am so captivating that not only are you paying attention to me, but you also don't want to attack me, you want to deal friendly with me, you want to, there actually are strictures mechanically that means you can't even attack me. So if I activate that level of power, I'm so much more. You're so much more awestruck than just using awe.
And then there's some that are much more mentally focused. Dominate is one of those abilities that.
Look into my eyes. I will tell you what to do.
This is definitely the one that messes with memories.
Yes.
And command.
That is the ability of a vampire to force their will on another person's mind. But another one is obfuscate.
Yes, obfuscate, so you can hide in the shadows.
Yes, basically, rather than forcing your will on another person's mind, you're clouding yourself from another person's mind.
Right. It's the Nosferatu movie way back in the day. They always cling to shadows because at least in the Nosferatu clan, they're horrid, horrendous beings. They want to get away from you, be invisible to your eyes. So their ability in obfuscate allows them to do that and still walk in the mortal world.
The shadow knows. I love the shadow. I think the shadow is like it's a sadly not represented enough old radio show, and it's perfect for obfuscate. If you've ever seen that cheesy Alec Baldwin movie, that's pretty obfuscating.
Hey, it was cheesy, but it was good.
It was a good movie.
I stand by the
I do
shadow.
too.
It was kind of Velveeta level cheesy.
I like Velveeta
True.
sometimes.
Yes, it was.
I own this. And then there's some powers that are the classic powers that vampires have had. We see them in literature. Animalism is one. Protean is another.
Yes, animalism is what allows you to speak to and command animals of the dark creatures of the earth. And Protean is the shape-shifting ability, the seeing in the dark, becoming that wolf. Or bat, bat, that's the stereotype.
And again, for animalism is a great example of, at the first level, it's, you can talk to the squirrel or the bird or the wolf that's walking by and gain information from them. When you get to that higher level of animalism, you've spent more to discipline yourself. You can actually begin to communicate and control and quell the beast in another vampire. So it doesn't just mean, I'm controlling the squirrel anymore. It's, I'm affecting you.
Exactly. And then the one discipline that is perhaps the oddest, but can be certainly the most useful is Auspex, which is...
Auspex is great. I love Auspex.
Auspex is such a great discipline. It is basically extrasensory perception. It is the ability to tap into people's minds, to go into the astral plane, to see auras, to be able to feel emotions on objects left behind. It's...
And again, starts at the very first level being heightened senses. It's you can see a little farther, you can hear a little better, you can smell a little clearer. So you just, all your normal senses are heightened a little, but by the time you get up to, the 4th and 5th level of the discipline, you're seeing auras, you're getting emotions off of objects. You can use your mind to telepathically reach out to another person. You can send your astral form out into the world, leaving your body safe at home, protected in your haven, and still observe things that are happening 50 miles away.
It's certainly one of the cooler and also one of the little bit more out there vampiric disciplines. But these disciplines we just named, these are the most common disciplines you'll see amongst vampires. Some of these may be special purviews of certain clans. Protean, for example, is the gangrel specialty, but certainly other clans that aren't gangrel could potentially learn Protean. So all these disciplines we just named are ones that you will commonly find amongst vampires. But then there are some disciplines that aren't particularly common, and that's because they're specific to the clans that practice them, and they're not usually practiced outside of the clan that uses it. So, for example, one of the primary ones we'll run into quite a bit, that you'll run into in most LARPs, is quietus.
Yes, that is one of the true specialties of the Assamite clans, who are, as you guys get into clans further down the road, they are the assassins of the vampiric world, or sometimes they can.
Not always assassins.
Not always.
I have a bone to pick on that. We'll wait until we get to Clan Assamite.
I'd like to be back for that conversation
We will totally
to
have
debate
you
the other
back
side.
for that. You can see Jen rant for a while. So, Quietus is one. Another one you'll run into commonly in a lot of LARPs is Demontation, which is the gift of the, well, maybe gift of the Malkavians. This is a discipline that stirs up the madness in other people.
Yes, it also not just madness, but it can deal with fears and doubts. Would you say it's a social ability or more mental?
I believe mechanically it comes off of the mental test pool. I could be wrong about that, but I believe it comes off mental. But yeah, it can manipulate emotions. It can manipulate minds. So it really is one of those that it can hit you both ways. Again, not mechanically, but the role play that you experience after you've been hit with it. If I can tell a story real quick, I had this great moment playing a while back, and my character got in a fight in Elysia, which is a bad thing. Very bad thing. And I got hit by a Malkavian who used Demontation to really kind of calm and mellow out my character. Well, another character also got hit with it the next turn. And then that character and I, we were both improvisers through a couple of the different programs, which is how I met him in the first place. We just started playing off this like really low key, mellow. Hey man, I'm so sorry I got in a fight with you. I'm so sorry I got in a fight with you. I didn't mean. It was a great, and the entire rest of the room had to break character and laugh at what we were doing because it was so much fun to play.
Did you guys go out for like vampiric munchies afterwards? Like hit up a Taco Bell at 3 a.m. and
yeah, the cashier there was very tasty.
I bet they were. So
vampire joke.
Dun, 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 dun. So there are a couple other disciplines that, depending on the game you're playing in, you won't necessarily see a lot of the time. One of the ones that is very rare for you to ever see in a game is one called Chemistry. And that is the discipline used by a particular clan called the Ravnos, who we'll get into at a later date. But they're not a very common clan to run into, hence why you won't see it very often. But this particular discipline allows you to create illusions that look real.
Yeah, I've only ever seen one character have it.
Yeah, it's very rare. And then obtenebration, which, again, depends on the game you're playing. You may or may not see it. If you're playing in a Sabbat game, you'll see it a lot. If you're not playing in a Sabbat game, you'll probably see it very rarely. This is the discipline that is the hallmark of Clan La Sombra, and they actually use it to manipulate shadows.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's what we do in shadows.
It is what you do in shadows. I knew you were going to get that in there. It's a pretty sick discipline, and it's very ill understood outside of Clan La Sombra.
And that's how they
like it. But when you see it as a character, it will scare the piss out of you. So it's pretty dangerous.
The next category is my particular favorite. It is what we consider the magical or mystical disciplines. There are a couple of clans that have a penchant for this sort of thing.
They do.
The one that you will definitely run in the most is the pillar of the Camarilla, the Clan Tremere.
Clan Tremere.
Sure. Totally pillars above board. They love the Camarilla.
Nothing to see here. Don't mind that pin pricking your hand to sign it in blood. Don't worry.
We absolutely follow the laws of the Camarilla. What are you talking about?
That's right. And this ability that they possess is commonly called thaumaturgy. Yes. It's just basically blood magic, but there's a lot of levels to it.
And we'll get more into it when we explore Clan Tremere a little bit more. But thaumaturgy is perhaps one of the, well, it's definitely the hallmark of Clan Tremere, but unlike a lot of the other blood magics, this is a lot more adaptable and structured. So there's a lot of crazy things that thaumaturgy can do that not every blood magic user can do. But there are other forms of blood magic that aren't Clan Tremere.
This is one of the things that, again, goes into character and flavor of the World of Darkness is the Tremere and their thaumaturgy is very what you imagine, European-based, alchemical, the old wizard in the robe kind
Harry
of
Potter.
idea. Harry Potter.
You're a wizard,
And
Harry.
so in such...
And a vampire.
It has a cultural hallmark. These other clans, they also have the same thing. There's the, what is this,
Durinkai,
which the Assamites practice, and it's steeped in their traditions and culture. And then there's Setite sorcery, which is the followers of Set. Again, their almost religious-like culture that they possess. And then the pesky thorn in everybody's side, the necromancy and the Giovanni.
What you talking about? Giovanni are awesome.
Oh, sure. Yes. They'll make a deal for you anytime. But watch out. There's probably a ghost following you home.
That's only because you know, it's the ghost of their second cousin who's also their sister. Or wait, how's that work in Clan Giovanni?
Hey, we don't need to go there.
No. 3 times removed, fair game. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, okay. So, blood magic it's a very rare thing to have if you are not a part of one of those clans. Those 4 in particular, guard their blood magic secrets very dearly. Yeah. There are a few other clans and bloodlines out there who might practice it, but they're very rare indeed. Most vampires will not have blood magic, and they won't be able to have access to it.
Right, and sort of the idea there is it takes decades and centuries to truly learn and discipline yourself into the high levels of these magic. The Tremere are really only able to do it because they have so much magic already steeped into them. They recruit from people that already have at least some magical talent. They're able to kind of learn and foster that ability.
That you know of.
It is truly a rare ability to have.
Right. And moving on, this brings us to the near bottom of the character sheet where you've got, what are these things? Blood, willpower, what are all these pools? What does this mean?
So, as you might imagine, blood is very important to a vampire. And the different generations we talked about way back at the beginning, it gives you different amounts of blood and your ability to use the potency of the blood that you have stored within your body to do these things like use your celerity, use your fortitude, other abilities, etc. The blood pool is essentially how many uses of blood you can get out of the blood you currently have stored within your body. And you, again, replenish these by going out and feeding from either your herd, or maybe you go out and do risky and that, like you talked about earlier in one of your backgrounds, that prostitute on the corner. Maybe you're feeding off of her, but you might get caught while doing that. So there's always the danger there. But it allows you to refresh, to bring in more blood, so you're able to do more things in that world.
Okay, so blood pool is essentially the amount of the blood that you have at your disposal to
activate your abilities. Your disciplines,
on a nightly basis, what have you.
Right. And mechanically, a neonate will have a blood pool of 10, which means they can really only do 10 things. But someone that has 5 dots in generation, that is that 500-year-old vampire, they can use their blood much more efficiently, and they can get 40 uses, or 30 uses. A lot of uses out of the blood that they have in their body. Even if they might physically be the same size as the other person, they can just use it that much more efficiency because their ability to use it is that much more potent.
Right. And what is willpower?
Willpower. Let's say that vampire is, looking through my eyes. I will tell you what to do. But you want to try to resist that person. You're going to use your willpower to try to break that person's control. So in a test where another vampire is going to try to control me, he's going to use his mental plus his intimidation to create his pool, his test pool. I'm going to use my mental plus my willpower to try to resist. So we're going to compare numbers, and then if I fail that test, I can activate one of my willpower to give myself a retest. It's like, no, I really can't. I'm using all of my mental energy to try to really resist this command. So I activate my willpower, of which you're limited to 6 in a given game cycle. So it's not just blood pool where it can be refreshed in the night. Willpower, it only refreshes on a monthly game-to-game cycle.
So it's much more precious then.
Indeed, much more precious.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I had the Frodo reference earlier. I had to give that one.
No, well remembered.
So willpower really it's that mental fortitude, strength to either really push your control onto another person or really try to resist their control.
Okay, and now, Jen, this is something that's sort of, it goes along with backgrounds, influence, humanity or path. This can be quite murky. What is this?
Oh, yes, Jen, please tell us.
Yay. So every vampire, we've discussed this before, every vampire is constantly fighting against the beast. Remember, we've discussed this. Vampires are not human in the same sense as, well, the three of us sitting here around the table.
That you know of?
Well, I have wonders about Michael, frankly, but, you know. Yeah, again, I said I have wonders about Michael.
What? I'm perfectly innocent over here. Yeah. Moving on.
So every vampire is fighting against that bestial urge. And to kind of help them in as they're navigating this bestial urge, they often will follow a code of ethics. Just their moral code by which they live by. It's their philosophy on how to deal with this existence. Humanity is probably the most common one, especially if you're going to be playing in the Camarilla. It's basically you're living by some of the same moral codes as humans do. It's the same morality as most of humanity, maybe a little bit more callous. But it's sort of the baseline, and this is particularly common for the younger vampires, because younger vampires were humans just like, I don't know, 5 minutes ago. So they haven't forgotten what it means to be human. Older vampires often struggle, though, with this. So as you will see on your sheet, you will have a series of dots that lists your humanity rating. The more dots you have in humanity, the closer you are to your humane self. The fewer dots you have, the less close you are to your humane self, and the closer you are to your bestial self. The key is you want to keep that number high and not have it go low. But you live in a world where, well, it's the world of darkness. Bad shit happens. Things are going to occur. You're going to do that awful, horrendous, bestial, vampiric thing. And that's going to test your humanity. And over centuries and over time, it'll start to erode. And that number is going to get lower and lower and lower. And that's going to be a key source of conflict for your character in terms of their psyche.
Absolutely. This is one of the things, again, as a player, it really adds that level of, ambiguity to a decision, whether a moral gray area that you're going to have to make a decision for, and you may be forced to make it since we have story time, as what happened to one of my characters is that I was forced to kill another vampire. It was him or I, and I had to make a morality check based on that because I killed someone. But even though it was self-defense, it was still something that was forced upon me, and I lost. And so that brought me down a little bit in the humanity rating. As you said, shit happens. It's the world of darkness. Things start weighing you down.
Exactly.
I really like, because even human morality changes over time, I really like it when a player gets into the mindset of their character. If they were a 1920s gangster, their sense of what was a human, ethical, moral issue at that time, and compared to someone that was just turned to a vampire 2 years ago, they're going to have a wildly different, like, oh yeah, if sometimes there's a guy who's a problem and the guy's got to be taken care of. And that person, that 1920s vampire, it's the normal way of humanly thinking to them. But a person who was just turned a year ago would be like, what, you actually want to pull a gun on someone? What are you talking about? That's crazy. That's such a huge sin, and that's outside of my ethical structure. But if a player can give me a good RP reason and really play that up as to why their character thinks it's perfectly okay to do that, as a storyteller, I love moments like that. I'm really impressed when a player will do something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are great.
So every so often you'll run across a character, and you as a new player probably will not be playing this, but you may run across another player who is. and they are not a humane vampire. What do we mean by that? Well, they are following what is called a path of enlightenment.
Right. This is the code of ethics that, as you said, that a vampire has to follow in order to keep control on a nightly basis. They've left humanity behind because it doesn't work for them, but yet they can't just be running around wholesale, monster of the night. They have to rein the beast in somehow.
Exactly. So over the many, many centuries of vampiric existence, different vampires have come up with different philosophical paths. And I stress philosophical because these are philosophies. These are ways that different vampires, sometimes as individuals, often as groups, have come together to try and create ways to cope with the nature of vampiric existence. And so there's different ones, and we're not going to go into them in this podcast, but sometimes you'll run across that. And they are not humane in any stretch of the imagination. Sometimes things that would horrify a humane vampire, say like pulling a gun on somebody, they would just be like, and? I mean, that's not the question they're asking. So it adds to the flavor and the color of the vampiric world when you realize that not everybody is going to think the same way that a human does.
Right, and if you're playing in a Camarilla Chronicle like the Pillar's Assault game, most of the players there, their vampires are going to be on Paths of Humanity. But if you're playing into a Sabbat game, if you have it would be the rare character that would be on Path of Humanity at a Sabbat game, just because the ideology is so vastly different. They're not trying to control their beast anymore like you would on Path of Humanity and into Camarilla.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, all of this, whether you're doing Path of Humanity or another Path of Enlightenment, all of it is really at its heart the effort to try and control the beast. If you lose that effort, and you will enter into a state of what is called wassail, in which your beast is permanently taking over your mind. You will become a slavering, bloodthirsty monster. There is no way to recover for 99.9% of vampires. There's one vampire out there who is known to have recovered from it. But she's the exception and not the norm. Yeah. It is a horrible, horrific existence. Everything that was you is gone.
And when that happens in game, if your character were to succumb to that's generally player death or character death. You have now ended that story arc, and you as a player are then brought over, and you create a new character.
Right. Simple as that.
Yeah. Exactly. So speaking of the beast, what in the world are beast traits?
Beast traits are always one of those things of that they come into play, and every time they come into play, I reopen my player's manual and I reread it just to make sure I understand it at that moment. But they are at its core level, they are how strong your beast is and how many hooks your beast has in you at that moment, how much it can try to control you, how much it can try to claw its way out and consume your rational mind.
Exactly. And for some vampires, like the Gangrel, the beast is always going to be a little bit more on the surface than other vampires who try to subsume it more. But there are times when the beast gets out. It's a little like more Marvel references. It's a little like the Incredible Hulk. It's like, you're cool. Now you're a raging green, like, anger machine.
Vampire smash!
Exactly. So I think we just broke John now. So once that happens, that actually leaves something of a mark on the vampire themselves.
Right, and the beast traits play into the idea of if you commit sins against your path of humanity or whatever path of enlightenment you are, and you reduce your humanity or your whatever your ethical standards are, that weakens you against the beast. That allows, if there are more beast traits, the check to try to resist losing your humanity if you get caught in a self-defense situation. You have a lower test pool to test against. You have a greater chance of losing that which connects you to humanity, which makes your beast stronger and closer to that edge.
Right. Now, looking at the sheet, there are levels to the beast trait pool. As a player, how does that factor in? Like say that you have you've gained one beast trait. What does that do for you or to you?
It in of itself, it doesn't do much at the moment. As you gain more beast traits, or if you gain a lot of beast traits because you commit a particularly grievous sin, that's when you start testing against to see if you lose your humanity or not. I believe it's, and this is, again, one of the reasons why I check the book every time I start talking about beast traits. If you have 5 beast traits, you have to make a test to see if you lose your humanity or not at that time. So it doesn't immediately control as my character's, I have one beast trait, my character's completely out of control. But it's that slow build, it's that gradual, that beast is just a little bit stronger inside of you. And as it grows to levels 2, 3, 4, and 5, that beast can lash out at your character.
Vampire Smash.
Yes.
Smash. Okay, and moving on, we've got the health pool. What are the health levels? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but let's go ahead and...
Right. Health levels, like if you ever played a video game or D&D or anything like that, the idea of hit points. A fighter might have 100 million hit points. A wizard's only going to have 12. In Vampire, they change it around a little bit, and all vampires, unless there are again specific flaws and traits, merits that you can take to change it a little bit. But every vampire is going to have 9 health levels, and they're divided into 3 different tracks. And as you take more damage, and more tracks get taken up with wound penalties, you start losing things like maybe you can't run as fast because you've now lost your minor abilities to do. And once you get all 9 of those hit levels are damaged, you've essentially lost all your hit points, you can actually fall into torpor or be completely destroyed at that time.
Wow. Okay, so it's good to keep track of that.
Absolutely. It's actually one of the things that it's always on every character sheet. As you take a punch earlier in the evening, as you maybe get shot on your way from point A to point B, you have to keep track of these things because it also requires resources to heal. And if you take, there's the normal lethal damage, like, I've shot you with a gun and you take 2 points of damage, let's just say. You can spend blood to help heal yourself, but if I attack you with a flamethrower and you take 2 points of aggravated damage, you can't just immediately heal out of that. It's your flesh is so destroyed and damaged, it can take nights to recover that damage. So if there is a particular event, in your character's life tonight that causes a few points of damage, you might have that damage for a few nights. So if you get attacked again tomorrow night and the night after and the night after, which is a great way if you're attacking another player, is to send your minions, your retainers, your influences out there to really harass and harry a person over several nights. It weakens them over time, and the person can't always recover quickly.
Not that I've ever done that in game, because that's a mean, horrible thing to do.
No.
Hold on, I'm writing this down. What was that again?
Never have done that in game, ever.
No. Nobody take notes on that.
Ever. So, one thing we wanted to cover that isn't on the character sheet in the book, but I kind of feel it's important because this does come up in games sometimes, is derangements. Sometimes, and this isn't a pool per se, but it's something to keep in mind. If you have a character that has a derangement or is hit by a Malkavian with a mean streak, and they give you a derangement.
That's never happened to me.
No, never. It's something you should also keep track of, because those derangements are going to affect you. Say you have a Malkavian who has given you a derangement that makes you OCD and want to count things, which is a very classic vampire derangement in literature. Then the minute someone throws a box of nails at your head, you're not busy in the middle of that fight. You're busy counting the nails on the ground.
1 nail.
Two
I
nails.
left that door so wide open. But
Walking right through
your
it.
derangements are going to affect you on a very real level. So if you have them, if you suddenly develop them in game and it's not something your character is built with, you do want to keep track of that.
Right. And going back and really one of the things through all of this character sheet is a lot of these can help inform your role play. So if you have that OCD level need to count, that informs your role play. The character name on the sheet informs your role play. The backgrounds, whether you're a high influence person or maybe you've got a lot of money or you got a lot of allies, it all affects your role playing and informs the player on all these little things, these little quirks. Because a LARP, a live action role play, is all about the role play. It's how you get in there with another player and how you act. And all of these things on the character sheet help inform that.
Absolutely. That's exactly why we're doing the podcast, is to keep that information, get it out there.
And this is, like Michael said, this should be used as sort of the framework. It's the baseline. It is the things that you keep in the back of your head to know just like how a character operates in this world, in this game, in this framework. But that's not everything that is your character.
Right. Yeah. As with anything, the more you play it, the longer you play it, things are going to change. This is the base. You learn new things. You have new disciplines. You find new friends. You make allies.
Right. And you can, over the course of the game, spend experience points to increase and change these abilities. Maybe you started and you thought you wanted to really play this social character who knew everything, but over time you realize that, or the character realizes that it's a darker, meaner world out there, so they realize that they got to get tough or die. So over time, you spend that experience points increasing your physical traits. Well, that's a shift, a change in the character, and the change in the role play that goes with it.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And really, you should just use this as a guideline. I mean, you're going to have other pieces that are going to inform your character. Your character histories often are huge informative pieces in terms of the rich internal landscape of who your character is, where they came from, why they are the way they are. And sometimes the character sheets reflect that history of the character in the past, but will shift and change as your character has more experiences in the game. Your clan and your sect and all the politics that go with that, those are all going to change and shift things that happen to you.
Absolutely. And to give a completely shameless plug for Pillars of Salt, the game that I'm a storyteller for, plays every once a month in Los Angeles. I always, when I get new players coming in, I always tell them to read that history, that character history. It's generally only a few paragraphs, at least to
Unless
start.
I'm writing it, then it's usually a page.
True. But it gives you the idea of the history, and I always suggest that players really focus on that backstory and looking at these pieces that inform their role play. Because if they walk in on their first game and 10 minutes later they're attacked by someone, I as the staffer am going to be right there to help them with all of the mechanics, all of the numbers on their character sheet. But they're the ones that are in the driver's seat to get to that fight in the first place, to get to that conflict or get to that success, because they're in control of the role play. And I always push players, get into the role play, read the backstory, get an idea of what is everything on your character sheet and see how that role plays or how it informs your role play. But don't worry necessarily about the math. I'll be there on a game day. There'll be other storytellers there on a game day to help you with the math. You enjoy the role play.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as much as we would love to know everything about everything, none of us is. Even the most experienced role players are going to be like, "Oh my gosh, wait, is demontation a mental or social based discipline?" We're all going to do it because there is so much information to know. Your real goal should just be to go in there to have fun, to play your character. And if you hang up with your character sheet and you're like, I really don't know what my test pool is, ask. There's no harm in asking. Most of us are pretty nice people out there. We will completely love to help you. And on that note, if you want to understand a little bit more about your character sheet and how it works, there is the main books that you can use. We cover mostly a LARP-based character sheet today, so you can read up on. We're using BNS and Pillars of Salt, the By Night Studios Mind's Eye Theater book. But whatever game you're playing, if you're playing a tabletop game, read up on your Vampire 20th edition. Go read your standard base book. It will have all the information in there, and if you don't understand it, feel free to come and ask. I know I sometimes get lost in the mechanical minutia because it's hard. Let's be honest, it is hard trying to understand a concrete idea that is turned into a number, essentially. It's not easy.
This is a collaborative effort, and we're all here for the game. We all want to make sure everybody's having a good time, ourselves included.
And from the storyteller perspective as well, it's I have played in a lot of games. I have run a lot of games, not just Vampire, but D&D and all these other things out there. There are so many rules that are floating around in a storyteller's head and in a player's head. It's hard to keep track of times. So there are absolutely times where pulling out the book and you know, I, as a storyteller, have to go and pull up the book because it's like, all right, I remember a year and a half ago I was asked a similar question, but I got to figure this out now. So I don't worry about getting intimidated by, oh, the book is so great, or oh, I have to know the particular thing. Come in there, aim for the role play, have fun with it, and you know, let the storytellers worry about the mechanics, at least at the start.
Absolutely. Well, all right, everybody, we did it. We made it through a character
Yay.
sheet.
Fast and Furious in here.
Yes.
We did it fastly and furiously. I feel like Vin
That's right.
Diesel over here.
There's still a lot more to cover, but obviously we'll have future episodes in the podcast for that. Also, we will have Storyteller's Corner, or ST Corner, is going to be a regular segment.
STC, yeah, you know
Oh my
me.
lord. What?
Wow.
You were just dropping
Okay, that
some,
just happened.
90s hip-hop, yo.
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 So we're going to use those ST Corners to dive into the more tips and tricks that we've learned, that our storytellers have learned, to help you navigate the game and continue focusing on that role play, and just sort of so you're not scared by the mechanic. That's the whole point of this.
Yeah. The mechanics should not scare you away or worried about, all these other people know it so much better than me. It's no, come in and enjoy the role play. It's live action role play, not live action do math on your character sheet while other people are looking at you and you're really nervous about it. No, it's about the role play.
That's right. This is a munchkin-free zone.
I could make a munchkin joke, but that'd be really horrible, and I would be an awful human being.
I got a lollipop.
I'm going to hurt you so bad.
I would like to point that I'm Michael Steinbach, and I did not make any of the jokes related to that segment.
Well, thank you, everybody, for listening to this wonderful episode. I hope that you got a lot of information out of it and find it very useful. And thank you, Michael, for stopping by.
Of course, I'm happy to be here, and if anyone out there is listening and wants to get more into roleplay and is in the greater Los Angeles area, you can find Pillars of Salt through Facebook just by clicking for Pillars of Salt, and come and join the group, and I will probably actually be the first person to chat with you in the game, unless you actually know someone already playing it.
Yes, Michael is very approachable. He's a very nice guy. Please,
Aw, shucks.
find the page Pillars of Salt on Facebook.
And if you want to get a hold of our lovely podcast, we can be reached at Podcast by Night on Facebook. You can also find us at By Night Podcast on Twitter, or you can email us directly at podcastbynight@gmail.com.
All right, thanks for joining us, and be sure to stick around next week. We will have another episode for you to put in those ears.
Yes, we are going to be covering finally the sects of vampires. That's sects. SECTS.
That's right.
Oh, okay, now I get it.
I told you, no vampire nookie.
That's right. No sexy times. We will finally be telling you
Sexy
about
times, not
what-
sexy times.
We will finally be letting you know what the Camarilla is, who the Sabbat are, the Anarchs, the Independents, and why they really should get along, but they don't because ideologies.
Isn't that just always the way? If
It
only we
is.
could all learn to work together and just, get along.
Oh, kumbaya.
Well, that's the nature of the jihad for you.
That's true. All right. Well, until next time, I'm John.
I'm Jen.
And I'm special guest Michael.
Woohoo! All right. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.